Um, Welcome to today's Tulane Family Programs webinar, which is the Newcomb-Tulane College Study Abroad program. First, thank you so much for your patience and grace as we navigated unexpectedly having to reschedule from last week. We truly appreciate your patience. So tonight, if you look on this screen, your participant microphones are muted and the chat is disabled. We're going to use the Q&A feature in your controls to submit questions. I recommend waiting until the end to submit questions because many of your questions will be answered in the presentation. The link to the video recording as well as the PowerPoint slides will be shared with you in the next 1 to 2 days. So tonight, our panelist is Annie Gibson. Annie is the Director of Study Abroad at the Center for Global Education, and I'm going to turn it over to Annie.
Thank you, Catherine. So we are so happy to have you here. Thanks for being a part of your students' journey right now as the semester is wrapping up and students are preparing for their upcoming semester abroad. There is a lot of excitement both in my office to finally see students who have been planning for their semester abroad to actually have the opportunity to go out and realize their plans. And you as parents and as families are so important to this journey. So today we hope to answer some of the kind of nuts and bolts questions, and I'll try to keep my presentation as kind of brief as possible to leave time for your questions. So with that, we'll jump right in. So the first thing to know about is that, as Catherine mentioned, my office, the Newcomb-Tulane College Office of Study Abroad, oversees undergraduate study abroad programs for all Tulane students. There is a separate webinar for Freeman students for the business school that are studying abroad through Freeman. Some of you may have joined that webinar last night, but this office houses study abroad for all Tulane undergraduate students. When students are accepted to study abroad through our office, they complete an application with us internally. And in most cases, students will also have a secondary application to the program that they choose. So Tulane, on our end, we are verifying that they're meeting all of our internal requirements for study abroad, that their GPA meets where it needs to be, that they're on track for graduation with study abroad, that they've thought about their academic plan as it relates to their academic programming that they plan to do. And so once all the students who have completed this stage would have received a notification letter. It's quite a detailed notification letter, and we always ask that students share that with families or with those of you that might be paying the bills for study abroad and kind of want to know the nuts and bolts questions. And even though you're empowering your student to do those next steps on their own, it's nice for you to kind of help be a gatepost for them to know what the next steps are. So you can ask to see their notification letter for study abroad at Tulane, and it kind of outlines the next steps your students are working on now. The biggest piece of that is that at this point, they will have completed also a secondary application for admission to their chosen program. So first they're accepted from Tulane, and then they apply directly to either the host institution, so directly to the university where they're going to attend, or to a third-party program provider. Most of these have some sort of acronym name. So you might have seen CIEE or DIS or IFSA as examples, where there's kind of a secondary application that students then apply to and are accepted to. So you can ask your student, where are you in your secondary application? So as I explained, we have the Office of Study Abroad, which I oversee, that oversees all majors. And then we have the Freeman School of Business that operates exchange programs specifically for business majors. And then my office also operates a smaller number of Freeman approved study abroad programs. So they're programs operated through my office that are also approved for Freeman and meet some of the business requirements for Freeman. So I'm putting that out there to make sure you're in the right webinar. If you're here specifically for Freeman Abroad, that you're interested in, you want to hear about the process for studying abroad as a Freeman School of Business student, that webinar was yesterday, but we do have recording should you need to go back. The next thing we're going to talk about is tuition and billing. How does tuition and billing work during study abroad? So Tulane operates what's called, excuse me, a homeschool tuition model. And so what that means is during the semester abroad, your student will pay Tulane tuition and fees and the Tulane academic support fee. And then you'll pay housing and a program fee, typically directly to your program provider or the university. So this is sort of mirrors what happens on campus, that your housing is you're either doing housing through the program or you're finding housing independently, depending on what type of program you provide. And then the tuition is being paid by Tulane. So what happens in terms of billing? We will register your students into a placeholder course. And so they'll be registered into a 12 credit hour placeholder course that allows this billing to be triggered. They'll be billed through accounts receivable. And this means that the homeschool tuition model is very useful for students that have some sort of merit or financial need or financial aid package, because all of those will apply to study abroad just as they would at Tulane once the student is registered into this placeholder. So when you are receiving your bill, you will not be receiving a bill from your program for tuition. And if you do, there's a billing error that the study abroad office can help you resolve. But you will receive a billing, as I mentioned, for housing. So as students are navigating their housing billing, they can also consult with their financial aid advisor. Should they have any sort of aid package that covers housing, that can also be applied to their time abroad. There are a few programs that I want to mention that are kind of, the housing is wrapped into the billing of Tulane. They're called consortium programs. And those are listed on the screen: our Educo Paris program, our Reunidas Madrid, and then our Bologna program in Italy. You're actually going to be billed housing from Tulane. Those are the exceptions. On most of the programs offered through the Office of Study Abroad, independent housing is unlikely to happen. So if you're working with a third-party provider, students rarely choose independent housing options. They're asked to engage with the type of housing of the program that they are on. And if you're directly enrolling in a host institution and the housing isn't offered, then that's the case where a student may be in their own housing. Why do we use the homeschool tuition model? We get asked this question a lot. And again, as I mentioned, it allows for federal aid to apply. It allows for students to retain their scholarships. In doing this, and being enrolled in Tulane, it means that all the credits that you take while abroad transfer back to Tulane automatically as general elective credits. You have the health and safety oversight of Tulane. So students are automatically enrolled in an international health insurance plan. Students are automatically enrolled in something called Crisis 24 that is engaged in the case of any sort of emergency or evacuation, as well as being able to be a consultant or help place students find a medical facility should that be of need while abroad. It also gives students the access to on-site campus support. So advisors from the Office of Study Abroad who work with students in the pre, during, and post stages of their experience, any type of success coaching, tutoring, academic advising, et cetera, that they might need while on site. Academics while abroad. So as I mentioned, courses will automatically transfer as general elective credits, and the awarding of major, minor, and core credits are awarded through the department. We have certain courses that have been pre-approved by departments already, and we have a list of that. You can find that list on our website. And students are directed to it through an online course that they're enrolled in when they study abroad. But that list is only a small percentage of the breadth of offerings of courses abroad that students have. We really have courses in all different types of majors, and in all different types of departments. So it's often the case that students are taking courses for the first time, because we do have such a breadth of a portfolio. And there's a process for putting a syllabi forward for major, minor, and core credits that students are directed to through this online Canvas course that they're enrolled in upon study abroad. We also have links to it on our website for students that are interested in doing sort of pre-approvals for that prior to going abroad. You can expect that the grades from abroad will appear, the letter grades will appear on their transcript, but that's not factored into their GPA. And the reasoning for that is that we do really encourage students to take a breadth of offerings, to engage in courses that they might not have been able to take at Tulane, to step outside of their comfort zone, to feel empowered to take courses in a second language, in content area that's of interest to them. So this is a way of sort of realizing for them that they are taking a leap in terms of cultural content in another environment in the educational setting. Grading structures and norms in other countries can be different. So it may be getting an A, for example, which an A or B, which might feel kind of the norm at a U.S. institution in the context of a host country, might actually be the exception to the norm, that a kind of a C, B+ might be the equivalent of what we consider to be an A in the United States. So those are all ways in which having the grade not factor into the GPA helps students navigate that sort of the difference of academic climate from one place to another. As students are choosing the courses and their enrollment, they did this both in their application stage to their particular program, and now as they're going through the process of enrolling in that completing their secondary application and enrolling in their institution abroad, they're encouraged to stay in contact with their academic advisors as well as their study abroad advisors as they choose the courses that they'll take. And I wrote on the screen, just as a kind of a caveat, the reminder that we often have students at the Freeman School of Business that enroll in Office of Study Abroad programs and are getting general elective credit. They just are not doing the coursework for Freeman Abroad credit. For Freeman Abroad credit, those need to be pre-approved through the Freeman Office of Study Abroad. And that was discussed in yesterday's webinar. So students, while on a semester of study abroad, will maintain their full-time enrollment through this credit holder at Tulane. So this course that they're enrolled in through the registrar here, and they are expected to take a full coursework while they're abroad, so that they should be enrolled in the equivalent of 12 credit hours while they are abroad. On a case-by-case basis, we may have students that would drop below that, but they are expected to enroll full-time. This is often for visa requirements as well. So if a student, and we also encourage students to enroll often in 15 hours of credit, just in case they get, a few weeks into the semester and they decide they need to drop a course, that they still maintain that full enrollment to stay eligible for their visa. The same pass-fail policies that apply at Tulane apply at apply while abroad. So if a student can take one course pass fail, and they have to notify the Office of Study Abroad within that 10 weeks of the start of the program. So that's kind of two-thirds of the way through the semester, which is the equivalent to how the pass fail policy works here on campus. And as students are applying for their secondary programs, it's important to note that sometimes the GPA requirements, while a student may be accepted to study abroad through Tulane, as you're going through that secondary application phase, there could be cases where the institution where the student wants to attend has a higher entry-level GPA requirement than what Tulane requires. So in that case, if you're in a situation where your student applies for their secondary application, they were accepted from Tulane, and they've applied to their secondary, the program, actual university or program they want to attend, and for whatever reason they're not admitted, they should then be in touch again with their Office of Study Abroad advisor. And if they have been approved through Tulane, we help place them on another program that fits their needs. And again, students will be held to the same academic and disciplinary policies as if they were on campus. And we like to emphasize this if there are issues, housing related violations, alcohol related violations, plagiarism, all of those cases are looked at as if in a similar way as they are if they were on campus at Tulane. This is also a time that students can feel a bit of stress in trying to figure out how their coursework that they take abroad will translate. Part of the cultural learning of study abroad is that they're navigating a new academic setting, and ways of operating are a bit different. So at Tulane, it's quite easy to see courses and course descriptions to know what's going to be offered one semester to the next. Depending on the location and the university and the culture of the institution where a student is studying abroad, it might be quite typical to not know exactly what courses are offered that semester until arriving on site. And actually kind of getting a list of enrollment. And in some cases, even kind of seeing a list published on a wall at a university. So there's a real range internationally about what courses look like and how one enrolls one semester to the next. That's kind of one of the first lessons in flexibility and intercultural learning that our students learn to navigate, especially when Tulane curriculum and students have this strong desire to sort of map out their curriculum ahead of time, and having to kind of wait and see what courses will be offered, what courses they're able to enter at times when they have to wait until arrival. So the more that you can sort of help prime your students to understand that they will be receiving general elective credit for the courses that they take abroad. And part of the learning of this experience is to be able to sit in that gray area at times as they decide on coursework and navigate other global ways of doing college is an important learning experience. Along with that, the expectations and norms in the classroom really vary and are things that our study abroad advisors meet with students abroad often. So for example, it's quite common as an example, if you're studying abroad in Europe, in the UK, as another example, in Africa, that you may have fewer assignments in your classes. At Tulane, they're kind of it's more common to have more assignments that kind of benchmark how you're doing. Whereas while abroad, a student might have a midterm and a final, and that could be their only grades. So in the cases I see more often where students struggle academically in study abroad or come back with an F, unfortunately, on the transcripts, it tends to be that they have a hard time. They haven't done a good job of sort of managing their time and realizing that there's this one exam they're going to take at the end that is going to be their full grade, and kind of the importance of that, and doing the readings along the way when there aren't benchmark assignments along the way. The learning style is often different. They couldn't be in classes that have discussion heavy grades. There are a lot of universities that are lecture heavy. So the students will go, they'll sort of have a lecture, no sorts of discussion, and then a final exam at the end, which is a kind of a different learning model than what they had at Tulane. So part of their learning is, what is the learning style here? What are the expectations here? And how do I sort of navigate that? Another kind of cultural classroom thing that can trip up US students studying abroad is that attendance policies may be much stricter, where 1 or 2 unexcused absence could be an automatic F. So for students that are thinking that they're going to, take long weekends and travel on a Friday and Monday and skip classes, one weekend of doing that could actually make them ineligible for moving forward in that course, and it could be an automatic F. So understanding the attendance policies in the setting, the cultural setting where they are. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that the internationally, the United States has much larger amounts of grade inflation than many of the locations where students will be studying. So what we consider to be an A in the institution where they're going might be considered a C or a B plus. So keeping that sort of that understanding that grades in there are also cultural. I work with a lot of students that are navigating that and then thinking about law school afterwards, and we do talk with students about how to sort of frame that and think about that moving forward. And I've been in touch with law schools and those and people involved in the entry process for law school or medical school and things like that, about how study abroad and differences in grading might impact. And the general consensus is, in fact, that seeing study abroad on the resume, on the transcript is a much greater kind of indicator that this student is a good fit, rather than the grade. That the grade isn't factored into the law school the entrance exam qualifications. And so that's often a fear that students do have. But as long as there's a way of sort of showing that this course was taken in an international setting, there is a difference in that in terms of law school and medical school entry. Classes can be more challenging at Tulane. This is the kind of the rigor of academics is something to keep in mind. And independence is really key. This is one thing that over and over again in evaluations of students after study abroad, it's that how much the experience allowed them to gain a sense of independence. So travel and logistics, as you're thinking about that right now. Tulane students are required to book through Tulane's World Travel Services. So this allows for Tulane support if there is needed evacuation or ticket changes for on-site emergencies. They are directed to about how to do this in this acceptance letter that I mentioned in the beginning. So a few things to note is that when you book through World Travel Services, any sort of budget airlines or non-refundable fares are not shown. So this allows for that flexibility of travel should there be a need. And as someone who was in this office and in this role during COVID, for example, this policy was so important as navigating getting students home quickly, helping students change flights, helping students in cases where they got stuck in certain places, knowing where our travelers were. This is all very, very important. There are cases where students are allowed to book independently. In the case that you're using your miles, for example, to cover the cost of a flight, But they have to have approval for that from the Tulane Travel Management. And I've included the email for that here. And students can book online through a system called Concur. They also have the availability of a travel agent through World Travel Services. And the information is all available to them, both in their acceptance letter as well as in an online Canvas course that all students are enrolled in and participate in prior to study abroad. So they're directed to understand how they book their travel for study abroad. Passports and visas. This is often one of the things that causes the most concern for students at this particular stage. In terms of passports, your passport must be valid for at least 6 months after your study abroad ends for you to travel. So if a student's passport is coming close to its renewal deadline, now is the time that they should be renewing their passport. I would recommend expedited service now. We are experiencing a lot of uncertainties in terms of processing time with the changes with the current administration. So I would if a passport is in need of renewal, now is the time to do that. Now is also the time to start getting the documents together for the visa. And in some cases, there are certain locations where getting a visa requires extra work. For those of you whose students are traveling to Spain and to Italy, those are two locations where visa requirements are quite complicated. So students should be well on their way to securing their visa at this time. But again, visa requirements vary by host country, by the citizenship of the student that's applying, and then also the consulate location. So if the student is applying from New Orleans, they're looking at the location of the Houston consulates in general. But if they're applying from your home address, there may be another consulate that you're looking at, and there can be variations site to site. Office of Study Abroad advisors are not prepared to consult with students on individual visa requirements for the programs. There are just so many variables. So the best line of next information about visa is to consult directly with the consulate and the program that the student is working with will also provide very guided direction in terms of visa, and the advisors with that program that your student is studying on can offer the best advice. There are changes with visas happen very quickly. We don't have a lot of ability to have sway in how those processes work. We do work very closely with our programs to make sure that students are able to study abroad. So for example, for those of you who currently have students applying to Italy, the requirements for entry to Italy right now have become quite complicated and difficult. And so there's kind of plan A's and plan B's going into effect as students are trying to figure out how to navigate their visa, and programs are thinking about contingency plans should there be cases where students do not get visas. So if your student is having trouble booking a spot at a consulate for their visas, they should be in touch with their program who is kind of helping guide them with the best advice. And there may even be cases in the case of very complicated visa situations where a student may spend a lesser amount of time in country in order to meet the requirements. But these are kind of case by case basis that we'll have to discuss one-on-one. And then we have other places where the visa process is quite easy to manage. Our students going to Australia, for example, the visa process is quite easy to manage. Our students going to places in Latin America might have a much different experience than others. The other thing to notice, for those of you planning summer travel or winter travel respectively, is that visa requirements often have a limit on the number of days that your student can be in country. So if that might limit what type of summer vacation or summer program that a student can engage in, or post-program travel that the student can engage in, so that they remain in country for the amount of time that is required for their visa. If it also in the summer, remember that in order to get a visa for many of these places, the student will have to send that visa, the passport, in the mail to the consulate, or will have to go in person to the consulate in order to get their visa, which could make travel in the summer more complicated. So your student should be planning, understand the rules and regulations for their host country, and have had a plan about that should they be considering summer travel or winter travel. Health and safety. So our number one priority is that we keep our students safe while abroad, and we have a lot of ways that we do that. On the front end, it's a lot of pre-work with your students through coursework, through pre-departure orientations, to help them understand cultural norms, to help them understand health within the context of the location where they are traveling, risks that they may need to learn to navigate while abroad. And then before they enroll, they are enrolled in, as I mentioned, Crisis 24 when they book their travel through Tulane, which, should there be any major emergency, should they need to make a call to book a doctor, should they need to send sort of an SOS sign about where they are at a given moment, all of that is available through this service called Crisis 24. Students are also directed to enroll in the STEP Traveler Program through travel.state.gov, and then are also sent information about their host countries through the State Department, the CDC, the WHO, all of these places where you can kind of get some information about your local setting. So at this time, what can you do to best support your student? The more knowledge going in, the better. So supporting your students to begin understanding what sort of support services they have on site. If they're going to a direct enroll institution, what does health look like for a student who is going to University of Sydney for a semester? What would that be like? What is the local on-campus health scenario like? Because that student is essentially a student at that local university for the semester. We also have cases where students are going through third-party providers that have another kind of level of help and support, where they might have a doctor on call that students can call, that they have a 24/7 emergency report number. Students should understand local conditions so that they know what conditions they have that might be aggravated based on their location. If your student has any sort of accommodation, whether that is housing accommodations or testing accommodations, all of that would be registered through the Goldman Center. And we always advise students that if they think that they may need something, it's better to request it early. So say they may need extra time for test taking, or there is some accommodation that they've never actually, that they've never felt that they needed to implement at Tulane, but they would be potentially abroad, it might become an issue. Having that on file already is helpful, because then as the Office of Study Abroad and then the on-site program can better inform that student about what is and what is not possible. We also encourage students to, if they have any sort of ongoing conditions, to have a health plan, whether that's maintaining contacts with their therapists or specialists via Zoom, and things like that. Students should plan to bring the medications that they're currently on while abroad. They're being abroad for the first time is not the time to practice going off medications for the first time, no matter how well they are feeling. There's a lot of change that happened to study abroad during study abroad. And it's important to research the local law and conditions to make sure that whatever medication that the student is bringing is allowed for entry, and that they have a supply that will last for the full time that they're there. Students should should remain enrolled in their domestic insurance, and then they are also in this international insurance through Tulane that I mentioned before. The there also is often kind of a third level. So you may find that your student is enrolled in another international insurance as well through their provider. But in general, make sure that your student is continuing their domestic insurance. That's the most important thing. So should there be some sort of issue that happens internationally where they need continued care back home, they need to maintain that domestic insurance. So that means that if you are enrolled in the Tulane health insurance, that the students must complete that annual health insurance waiver just the same way that they did when they were on campus. Life abroad. Families, you are at the kind of front end of this experience, and we talk to students about kind of the stages of culture shock. Your student likely went through a bit of this when in their transition to college, that there's likely going to be these stages of euphoria, the arrival, the excitement, and then these moments of lows, and transition kind of going up and down. And when we talk about culture shock, we like to talk to students about the fact that this is normal. Having the lows is normal. And even if when going through that difficulty, so they get back from their German class and I don't understand a word that we're saying in that German class. You don't understand a word they're saying yet, but you will, helping them reframe in positive ways, helping them sort of move through this frustration is so important. And you are such important coaches in this process. The other thing just to remember for you all is that they are likely calling you at their lowest moments. I have a 7-month-old son right now, and I'm always saying he's always cries to me. He's so happy to everyone else, and the moment I come in the room, he breaks down sobbing, and and it doesn't stop. I know when with you all with your students in college, they're likely calling mom and dad at that moment when they're feeling lowest, when they need a little bit of support. And ultimately things are normally they're gonna bump right out of it. But sometimes as parents, we can think that something is really wrong. They call, their housing is awful, no one's there to support them. They can't find a place to connect with people. And so you all end up feeling that things are going poorly. You contact our office. And by the time we call, they're having a great time and they're at the beach with their friends. This happens more often than not. So for you all as well to kind of understand these stages of culture shock, to be able to help them navigate that is so important. Housing abroad. This is a place where culture shock often happens. What housing looks like in a foreign institution and what housing looks like at Tulane may be quite different. Standards might be different. The size of rooms is going to be different. The apartment size is going to be smaller. It's going to vary by location. The commute is going to vary for those of you who have students who are studying abroad in Europe. It's quite common that a student would have a 30-40 minute commute from their housing location to the institution. This is quite normal for students in that host location. And that is part of the learning. We're not putting the students in Airbnbs right beside their school, because that's not realistic. That's not culturally in line with what happens in the location where those students are studying abroad. And we are trying to help them have an experience that is as close to understanding local conditions as possible. It's also important for them to not compare housing That no living situation is going to be identical, no living situation is going to be perfect, but learning to sort of navigate the ups and downs of housing. That being said, we are there should there be any major issues with housing. Their first line of contact will be their on-site program provider because they're in country and can help them resolve the issue. We do, since through our program, students are required to live in housing that is provided through their program. It also means that there's a level of oversight. One, it's been vetted for health and safety. It's been vetted for quality. So, so if there is a major issue, there is a way to help mitigate those changes as needed. The few reasons why a student would be allowed to live in independent housing going through a third-party provider would be if they're living directly with a family member, there is a waiver process for this, or they have some sort of accommodation that cannot be met by the program. And that's unlikely. In most cases, our programs can meet those needs. Here are some examples of different housing scenarios from our students internationally. You'll see in all these cases that they're very, very nice comparatively. I've seen dorms at Tulane, and though you might find housing smaller than what you find at Tulane, you often find that it is quite nice. So again, if a student is applying for any sort of waiver for housing, that would need to be on file through Goldman. Those requests for independent housing all go through our Goldman Center in consultation with Office of Study Abroad. Making friends abroad, airport travel, sort of that general adaptation stage. The initial stage of arrival, can be challenging, but being alone is not a complaint that we hear a lot from students. And in fact, there might be a moment of it, but usually after we get through that initial shock phase, students do find that they are quite able to sort of engage with other locals, students, or even with locals on site. And we also like to remind students that this is a real important chance to make new friends, to break outside the bubble. And that sort of helping them make that first step is very similar to their freshman year. They may have right now be feeling anxiety if they're choosing to go on a program where they don't know anyone. And again, that's that framing of yet. You don't know anyone yet. But in general, they will likely make some of their closest friends during their study abroad. And for Tulane students, about 50% of Tulane Tulane juniors will be abroad in this upcoming fall semester. So they're likely to see a familiar face either on their program or as they're visiting other locations. In terms of their arrival on site, if this is, we have a lot of resources for first-time travelers, should that be the case, and we're happy to direct them to how to navigate an airport, different resources that we have. Programs have varying levels of support upon arrival. On some programs, they'll have airport pickup, and others they won't. So it's important to sort of consult directly with the program. This is reminding students this is a study abroad academic opportunity. There's often this FOMO of stepping out of the comfort zone, just supporting your student to understand the fact that they have this experience to go abroad. They may be on a program where they're with a cohort of Tulane students, and thinking about the semester will go by very quickly. So the more that you can help your student understand that, the more that they can learn about the host and location, the better. One of the biggest complaints that we hear from students that sort of in retrospect is that they say, oh my gosh, I studied abroad in Barcelona, but I hardly know Barcelona because I traveled every weekend. So what are the ways in which they're getting to know the local scene? And then also making sure that they're taking the time to understand their academic calendar. When is the exam schedule? When are the start and end dates of the programs? Does your finals, does it go late into the semester? Are early exams allowed? These are types of questions that they need to look at closely. We have a lot of resources for students navigating different identities abroad, and that we can direct students to, and navigating politics, the election, etc., at this time. Thinking with your student about communication. Some students might buy a local SIM card. Some students will have some sort of international plan with their phone. So best ways to keep in touch. Thinking about travel, thinking about access to cash, whether that is through a bank account, or how students will sort of navigate their funding. Those are good conversations to have now, as well as thinking through their housing situation and how many meals are provided. I want to leave time for us to have questions now. So I'm going to just skip the rest of this and open this up, but it's so great to talk to you all.
Thank you, Annie. We do have a few questions already in the chat, in the Q&A. So we have a question about if I've already booked on my own, so I could use travel credits. Is that okay?
That's okay if you've used the travel credits, especially if you email that travel@tulane.edu and explain the situation. They will provide you a waiver. And the reason why it's important to do that is that there's a manual entry process to enter your student into Crisis 24. In order to get all of that health and safety emergency evacuation support that I mentioned. So if you didn't book centrally with Tulane, in order to get all of that emergency support, you have to go through that waiver process. And you would, again, that's travel@tulane.edu. And we'll put that in the email when we follow up.
Great. What's the visa situation for Greece?
There are a couple of different programs in Greece, so it depends which one they're on, but it's much easier than what I mentioned for Spain or for Italy, but it's kind of case by case and how long your program is. So have your student contact the study abroad advisor if they're not certain.
And we did CIEE batch visa submittal for Spain. How much complication to expect from that process, or how long until it comes through and returns the passport?
I'm so glad you did batch. That's the way to go. I don't have a clear answer. CIEE, you have the contact, or your student should have the contact of the person who is facilitating that batch, and so they are the ones that are going to have the most up-to-date answer from the consulate on how long the turnaround is.
Great. And then we have a question. Have students been informed of all that we have been told today, including have they been informed of the different standards for grading, studying, etc.?
Yes. So your student received they received this acceptance letter, so they get kind of the big nuts and bolts there. There's a in-person study abroad conference that that's mandatory to attend. So hopefully they attended that. Those that had a class conflict that didn't attend the in-person, they're enrolled in an online, and in fact, everyone's enrolled in an online Canvas course that's very detailed, much more detailed than what I covered with you today, with all of this cultural health and safety, academic, logistics, and everything. So ask them, have they done their Canvas pre-departure course?
Can you confirm students need domestic and international insurance?
Yes, they need domestic and international insurance.
Great. When should our students start looking for housing, and where do they start?
The program that they're applying to will direct them to the options for housing. So complete your secondary application. Once accepted, that they will have the different options of housing laid out that they can choose from.
We booked travel through IFSA as it was in the materials we received. Will this be the same?
They book travel through IFSA. So you book travel through your program. They must have, I imagine that you likely got a travel voucher. Oftentimes programs that are able to help students with travel funding, they'll have their own kind of booking process to pay for those things, or to create, or for health and safety reasons. So complete that same waiver process that I just mentioned of emailing travel@tulane.edu. And that's just going to mean you have like another level of health and safety support should anything happen. You can go through IFSA and their health and emergency, and then you also have Tulane's coverage with health and emergency.
And I believe this was answered, but can you give clarification again on the International Health Insurance Plan? Is it recommended not to opt out if you have a domestic insurance plan for the student?
So students need to be covered domestically and covered internationally. Tulane, there's a blanket policy for Tulane. It's called Chubb insurance. So since they're going on an approved program, they're enrolled in this program automatically. And students should do whatever they always do for their domestic insurance. So you shouldn't opt out of domestic. They need to be covered domestically and covered internationally while abroad.
And then adding to that, does the study abroad medical insurance and Crisis 24 cover the student when traveling outside their host country to another country over a weekend, for example?
It does during the time period of the approved Tulane travel. So during the period of their study abroad, it wouldn't cover post program or pre-program.
What is the visa process for Copenhagen?
That one is also easier comparatively to what I was explaining to you on site. The DIS program has provided students with some guidance on how to go about that process.
Okay. Are there requirements for the student's departure city to their program? For instance, did they have to leave from their home city or can they depart from anywhere in the US?
No, there are no they can depart from wherever.
Is the CEA Kappa Barcelona program considered a non-Tulane program?
Students can choose to study abroad two ways. I've been talking about approved, so when students are going through approved processes and doing this through Tulane, students can, if they're not doing CIEE, they also have the option of taking a leave of absence from Tulane and going directly to a program. CEA Kappa would be an example of that. So a student could choose to do a CEA Kappa program through us, or they could choose to do CEA Kappa as a non-Tulane leave of absence. The reason we encourage it through Tulane because your credits will all come back, and so bureaucratically it's easier. You have all this health and safety coverage that I've been talking about. When you're doing it on a leave of absence, you don't have that sort of coverage. Logistically, it's a lot easier for your student. There's a lot less to navigate than if you choose leave of absence.
And so that if they do a leave of absence through the non-Tulane program, they don't have to go through the World Travel Program, correct?
In that case, yeah, they're not Tulane
Okay.
students for that semester.
Okay. What if you can't get a visa appointment for Italian visa? Our student is out of country until mid-July. Is there a service we can pay to get an appointment?
I would recommend that they contact their program and get the advice that they can from their program. I'm hearing that the backup in the Italian visa department is quite extensive. Our programs are considering different contingency plans. The consulates are also often opening up new slots. But so you just have to keep checking and checking and checking. And I know that causes a lot of stress, and that I wish there was something that we could do, but really it's at the consulate level to make these decisions. But know that on the back end, programs are thinking very critically about ways to help support students who may not be able to get an appointment, but be as in touch with your program as possible so you have the most up-to-date information.
And so what happens if they don't get in and get it in time?
They'll have to have a visa to travel. There are different types of contingency plans. Like, given the fact that this year is especially challenging for the Italian visa, I know that there are some programs that are considering, for example, the option of lowering the number of days in country for the program in order for students to be able to opt in to an under 90-day in-country time period, and then they would take their exams remotely, for example, in a case where they didn't get the visa in time. But this is really program by program, and you have to sort of consult with your program on what contingency plans exist.
How do you get international health insurance for the Copenhagen program?
Students already have it through Tulane. So they're any Tulane student
That's the Chubb.
automatically get this Chubb international insurance. So they're all set. The great thing about the Copenhagen program and many of our programs, they're going to get a third insurance automatically being enrolled in the DIS program. That's through DIS. So as the student enrolls in that program, they're going to also have that opportunities. But we can send the link so you can see. If you go to our travel management page, you can get the number of the Chubb insurance that all Tulane students have when traveling internationally.
Annie, if a student is going to study abroad second semester junior year, when do they apply?
For study abroad,
Yeah.
the application deadline is will be it's early September. We just set that date today in our strategic plan. I think it was September the 15th. It's mid-September. It'll be as we're going to be soon opening that application, so they'll be able to see it.
Okay. And then if a student where they're studying, if the exam schedule goes into the spring semester at Tulane and the host university does not allow them to take early exams, what should they do?
In general, we're working with in those cases, we've likely guided the student that they should that this program really is only an academic year option, so they would stay for the full academic year, or there's an option for an early exam, or it's the case that they will in fact have to stay. But in general, the guidance from the Office of Study Abroad is that the student not enroll in that particular program. We do have those flagged, and your student, we should have been in touch with your student should your exams go into the Tulane semester for the spring, so they should be aware if there are any conflicts like that.
How do housing costs compare?
It really varies dependent on location.
Okay. And when can we expect the itinerary and housing information from the host program? Is it normal for the organization not to have the details posted yet?
So right now, as your student is kind of doing their onboarding for the program, they're likely in the stage where they're filling out their housing requests forms. So it's normal at this stage that you might not have your exact housing placement. You would have kind of a description of types of places or locations, but it's often closer to departure that you have your actual location.
And just to confirm, the international student is included and billed through Tulane, correct? They don't have to get it independently.
The international,
Insurance, health insurance.
right, you automatically have it. You don't have to, you already have the number, you're all set. Now, you will have your program may have another international insurance that is included in the program price. So it's another kind of level of, so when you, as I mentioned, you'll be paying directly a housing fee and a program fee. And on some of these program fees, you'll have also an international health insurance cost wrapped up in that.
Okay. The students program states they can find their own housing if they want. Is that acceptable to Tulane?
It is not recommended. So the one program that we have, CEA Kappa, does have the option for an independent housing. It is the current policy, it is allowed this semester. That's not going to be the case moving forward. But if your student is enrolled through CEA Kappa and independent housing this semester, it's still permitted.
And do they need to wait to book travel until after their visa arrives?
They in some cases they'll be asked to have a ticket confirmed in order to put in the application for the visa. It depends on the consulate. So they can go ahead and book travel, but I would make sure that you understand all of the visa requirements, and when you're going to have to send your passport off, or when you're going to have to go in person before making your decisions on travel. In some cases, you may not be able to apply for the visa until the summertime. And so just kind of understanding how the visa process will work for your program is important.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Let's see. And if we didn't get to your questions, we can answer them via email. What are unique, different considerations when attending Tulane summer programs instead of full semester programs?
The summer programs are really geared, so you're traveling with Tulane faculty as well as with an Office of Study Abroad staff member. There is a lot more built-in support. It's a cohort-based program. The design of the coursework is sort of experiential learning with Tulane faculty members. So it's a very close relationship between the student cohort and the faculty members and the OSA staff members. There's a kind of an extra level of oversight of health and safety. Oftentimes, we tend to see that our rising sophomores and rising juniors will choose to do summer programs, a great kind of jumping board to then doing a full semester.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Annie, for providing us with this great information. And like I said, if we didn't get to answer your question tonight, we can answer those via email. I'll be sending out Annie's PowerPoint as well as a recording to the to the webinar. And so you can always ask us your questions that way. Or you can email me at tyner@tulane.edu. That's tyner@tulane.edu, and I will get your questions answered.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to meet with parents. You all are so important in this process. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Bye.